Hello and welcome to GameSack. As you can tell by the shirt I'm wearing, this episode is all about the PlayStation Vita. Now this is a system that was never really given much of a chance by Sony themselves. It almost seemed like they completely ignored it not long after it was launched. Anyway, let's take a closer look at the system itself. The Sony PlayStation Vita. Sony's second entry into the portable game market was released in late December of 2011 and in 2012 everywhere else. Featuring a gorgeous 5-inch OLED touchscreen, dual analog sticks, a rear touchpad, and dual cameras, the Vita was and still is an impressive piece of portable gaming technology. Instead of the disc media used in its predecessor, the Vita uses solid-state cards to store the games. The system also requires a proprietary memory card to store game save data and whatnot. One of these cards originally did not come packed in with the Vita. The controls on the unit generally feel pretty good, though the face buttons feel a bit small and my thumb often hits the right thumbstick when I press them. The Vita is backwards compatible with the PSP in the same way that the Nintendo Switch is backwards compatible with all of your NES cartridges. Digital only. You can play between 5 and 6 hours before the battery runs out. A slim model of the Vita was released in 2014 that replaces the OLED screen with a regular LCD one and offers an extra hour of battery life. The Vita is powered by a quad-core ARM Cortex-A9 and a quad-core PowerVR SGX 543 MP4 Plus for the graphics with 512 and 128 megabytes of RAM respectively. The graphics resolution maxes out at 960 by 544, about 1/4 of full 1080p HD. The separately released PlayStation TV allows you to play Vita games on your TV via HDMI using a PS3 or PS4 controller, but many games are not officially supported due to their Vita-specific features like the touchscreen, touchpad, cameras, and gyroscope. A big hit at first, Vita sales quickly died down and Sony seemed to lose interest in supporting the system. It's estimated that anywhere between 10 and 15 million units have been sold with about 1,500 games released. In my opinion, that proprietary memory card was one of the worst ideas Sony has ever had, especially not including it with the system. They're always trying to come up with new formats and it backfires on them more often than not. Anyway, enough of that. Let's look at some of the games for the system. You can't have an episode about the Vita without mentioning Gravity Rush. Well, maybe you can, but not on GameSack. At the time of its release in mid-2012, it was one of the killer apps for the portable system. You play as Kat, who has amnesia. You soon find out that you have the ability to shift gravity, and as you've probably guessed, that's the main play mechanic in this game. You disengage from normal gravity by pressing the R button. You hover as you orient the camera to the place that you'd like to float to, and then press R again. You can't do this indefinitely though, as you have a bar in the upper left of the screen which will run out. If you press the L button, you'll return to normal gravity and your meter will quickly recharge. The amount of non-gravity the bar can hold as well as other abilities can be powered up throughout the game. There's also combat, which for the most part is pretty simple and fun. Just attack enemies in their weak spot by kicking them with the square button. Some enemies are floating in the air, so you may need to target them and then fly towards them with an air kick. Bigger enemies on the ground may also need to be attacked in this way. The game uses the touchscreen a lot, mainly to advance conversations. You also need the swipe to screen to advance the comic book-like pages of the story. What's really bad though is that the game wants you to swipe the screen to evade attacks during combat. No thank you. I'll just move out of the way with the analog stick if you don't mind. The cel-shaded graphics look really nice, though they do run at a lower resolution than normal for the system. I like how stylish some things are, and whenever something has color, it really stands out among the dusty-looking surroundings. That's good because usually it's something of significance. The music is mostly fantastic, with a lot of it coming from a real orchestra. This is an excellent game. However, I personally would prefer the remaster on the PlayStation 4 for the sharper graphics and omissions of any of the touchscreen shenanigans. I haven't played that version yet, so hopefully they didn't break it, but if you want to play it on the go, then it works great on the Vita. Want some sweet Killzone first-person shooter action? Then be sure to check out Killzone Mercenary, released in 2013. Unlike the PSP, the Vita has 2 analog sticks, so a first-person shooter can actually work pretty well here. Obviously, I'm playing on the PlayStation TV to capture this footage, and the game even recognizes that I'm using a PS3 controller in the options. This is a nice high-budget game that a lot of work clearly went into. It plays like your standard first-person shooter game with similar controls and missions that involve you moving from one area to another, having shootouts along the way. There's nothing tremendously new here when it comes to the action, though I did find the melee attacks pretty fun. They require you to throw the analog sticks in certain directions, and once you do it a few times, it feels like second nature. Overall, I have no issues with the control, and the game itself is good, though I'm not the biggest fan of first-person shooters. It didn't give me any motion sickness like these types of games usually do, and the mission structure kept me interested. Of course, there are random weapon shops scattered throughout just like there are in any combat zone. The visuals are outstanding, especially for a portable system. I mean look, they're nearly PlayStation 3 quality. Sometimes the frame rate will take a hit though. Still, if you want a portable first-person shooter on a system initially released in 2011, this game absolutely delivers. Ridge Racer was released in 2011 and is often referred to as Ridge Racer Vita. I was really looking forward to playing this one because Ridge Racer is usually awesome, especially on Sony systems. Sadly, that's not the case here, and the game is mostly a letdown. This one tries to envelop you in a more social world, making you pick a sponsor at the start, and then you're literally locked in that same group with other people who also chose that same sponsor. That's right, it wants you to do most of your racing online. The control and racing mechanics are actually pretty good, and it's fun to drive your car around the track. But sadly, this game has a really bad single-player mode. It's completely boring. All you can do is race a ghost, do a spot race, which is considered training, or a time attack. There's also lots and lots of menus that are touchscreen only. The graphics and music are both average, but there are a couple of standout tunes here and there. Sadly, the visuals only update at 30 frames per second, which is half as fast as the PSP versions. I can't really recommend this one. Like I said, I was immensely disappointed because Ridge Racer games are usually pretty darn good.
Just 2 laps to go.
Air Race Speed from Cubic is a slightly more interesting racing game. Here you're basically just racing against the clock through a series of tubes just for fun. There are no other racers besides you, and you need to do your best not to run into obstacles. The game reminds me of Atari's Stun Runner combined with Crystal Dynamics' Total Eclipse, just without the shooting action. It's fun to race through the tubes as the game moves fast, and you really need to be quick on the controls. Unfortunately, one time when I died, the game froze on me, so it still has some bugs. I still recommend that you try this one though. Even with its little quirks, it's quite fun. This next game I'm going to talk about, once I get off the screen, was only available at GameStop, at least initially. Ah yes, the old, let's limit the number of places our customers can buy the game tactic. Everyone loves that, it always works out great. Anyway, it's a nice game though. This is Tales of Hearts R from Namco, which was released in 2014. The original Tales of Hearts was a DS game, and this remake has been rebuilt from the ground up. Like all of the games in the Tales series, it's an RPG with a few elements from other games sprinkled in here and there. You play as an angsty teen trying to find shards of emotions that were broken away from a mysterious teenage girl. That's about as basic as I can summarize the story. The characters are all very stereotypical of a lot of JRPGs, with extremely impatient male characters who freak out over every little thing and everyone has their emotions dialed up to 11.
おい見ろよよく見やがれ怖くは自分のスピリアをぶっ壊したお前のこと心配してんだよ
You have towns with lots of people to talk to and things to do. The combat is mostly real-time with you controlling the main character. Eventually, others will join you in battle to help out. Everyone who participates in battle gets experience and levels up. They can also be equipped with better items and so on. But not everyone that travels with you will fight. Sometimes you'll have to go into a person's soul to extract an emotion shard. Of course, there's monsters and boss characters roaming around in there too. The combat is pretty fun, though I think I would like it more if I had never played any of the games from the Ys series. Still, it works fine and the game gives you a break if you need to use an item. However, if you do use one, you need to wait a bit before you can use another item. The visuals are roughly PlayStation 2 quality, and honestly that's just fine. There's lots of anime cutscenes, which is one of the main additions over the original DS version. There's also a lot of voice acting, though it's all in Japanese. The music from Motoi Sakuraba is adequate yet forgettable. I've always felt that maybe he got burnt out from being so prolific in the 2000s. I do really like this game though, and I like that it's not puzzle-based like Tales of Symphonia was. This is a comfortable and enjoyable RPG that doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. Dead or Alive 5 Plus was released in 2013. This is a slight upgrade to the original Dead or Alive 5, which was on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. It's pretty much standard Dead or Alive action, which is good. There are a few characters from Virtua Fighter to fight and also play as. The story mode is pretty easy, and sometimes it feels like you're spending more time watching FMV than you are fighting. The arcade mode can unlock a few minor things, like extra costumes. The stages are mostly extremely cool, many with lots of chaos going on everywhere. And you can move into different areas of the stage throughout the battle, just like you can in previous Dead or Alive games. Well, except the first one. A few stages are uninteresting, like the circus stages. Things added for this particular version are more training options as well as a silly touch play mode. I'm not even going to bother with that. The graphics are all great and move around at 60 frames per second with very few hiccups. The music is fine for the game, but nothing that I would consider especially memorable. If you want Dead or Alive on the go, then this certainly won't disappoint. Of course, I've got to mention Hotshots Golf World Invitational. Like all of the other games in the series, this one is a joy to play and a great way to pass the time. You can choose stroke play just to have fun, or you can choose challenges where you earn points. You then use these points in the shop to buy stuff and unlock features. As always, the gameplay is quite easy to get into, even if you don't like golf or haven't played a golf video game before. The graphics are pleasant, though they run at a significantly lower resolution than most Vita games for some reason. The music is really nice, and somehow never gets annoying. I'll always recommend Hotshots Golf on any Sony platform, and this one is no exception.
Perfect! I did it!
Here's Wipeout 2048, which is exclusive to the Vita. It's basically kind of a retooled version of Wipeout HD on the PS3. Don't let that fool you though, as this is a really good game. Supposedly, it also helped shape the Vita itself as it was designed along with the hardware and was a launch game in multiple regions. As a game, it's quite good, and you have a map that you move around by touching it, which grows and grows with more events as you play. The events vary from races to time attacks or even just trying to stay alive as long as possible. Always make sure to pay attention to the criteria required. Yes, the vehicular combat is still here and some events even concentrate on it, having you score enough points by damaging enemies in order to earn a clear. The controls are smooth and I've never had any issues with this game whatsoever. It feels a bit easy, but trust me, it can get pretty intense later on. The graphics were meant to be a showcase for the system when it launched, and it definitely succeeded at that. I mean, let's be real here, these are way better than anything the 3DS could dream of doing. They also do a great job of capturing what the year 2048 will actually look like, which is only 28 years away from when I'm making this episode. Unfortunately, it only runs at 30 frames per second, which is weird for a Wipeout game, which usually run at 60 frames. But it doesn't impact the gameplay, and it also doesn't make me motion sick. The music is all electronic and mostly good, especially if you like some dubstep in your games. If you like your racing games set in the near future, you can't go wrong here. This crazy game is Mobile Suit Gundam Extreme vs. Force, which is a Vita exclusive. First off, this is a pretty great mech game. It kinda sorta reminds me of Gun Griffin on the Saturn, but with faster paced action and the ability to have assistant mechs. That's right, you can pick various mechs or Gundams to help you out on your mission. And your mission can be one of several things. Defeat all of the enemies, defeat a boss, or even capture all of the bases on a map. All of the Gundams that you choose, of course, cost money, and you get more of that as well as level up each unit as you complete missions. The action is pretty good. You can lock onto enemies and shoot them from afar or even melee them up close. It's really quite fun, and blowing up other mechs is immensely satisfying. There are tons upon tons of Japanese voices in here. And if that's not enough, there are usually multiple people talking at once. Everyone has a lot to say, and you need to hear it all. Well, actually you don't, but the game sure seems to think that you do. This might be a good thing though, as otherwise the repetitive music might be too noticeable. This game was released in the US, but it's extremely hard to come by. To my knowledge, the Asian version is the same and much cheaper. Check the comments though to see if anyone corrects me on this, as info on the different versions is pretty hard to come by. Still though, if you can, try this one out, it's super fun. TXK from Llamasoft is a Tempest ripoff. And that said, it's a really good Tempest clone. Basically, you just need to navigate around the wireframe structure, zapping wireframe bad guys as they come at you. You control your little thing by pressing left or right, and I found it easier to use the D-pad as opposed to the analog stick. You get a super zapper which kills everything on screen that you can use once per stage, but here it's called the super tapper. That's a pretty clever way to be completely original. You can even earn a jump, and this can come in handy if the bad guys make it to the edge where you're moving back and forth. I love the vector-like visuals, and it's full of amazing color. The music is energetic, but maybe not quite as good as Tempest 2000's music. I wish I could remember Tempest 3000's music. I played it once on the new one, but like an idiot, I didn't record it. Anyway, this is a fun game to play for a few minutes every once in a while. If you've watched GameSack for any length of time, then you know I've got to mention all the games in the E-series that showed up on the Vita. I sure did like making these things for Sony's portable system. Not that I'm complaining. Ys, Memories of Celceta was the game that made me finally buy a Vita nearly 11 months after it was launched. This is a remake of Ys 4 from Falcom themselves. Previously, Falcom had farmed out Ys 4 to other developers for whatever reason, and now this is the one that officially counts. It's mostly all new, and it's not a remake of either Dawn of Ys for the PC Engine CD, nor Mask of the Sun for the Super Famicom. However, it does feature a lot of the same characters, and the story takes a few nods from the previous games. For a while, this one was exclusive to the Vita before finding its way to the PC and, most recently, the PlayStation 4. You've lost your memories, and you slowly gather them back through glowing orbs as you set out to map the forest of Celceta. The game's action is exactly like Ys 7 with its 3-party system, but now you have a super attack once you gain enough energy to do it. As always, the action is incredibly fun and the game is engrossing. However, sometimes you're allowed to make choices in the game and the prompts come up so quickly that I accidentally just select whatever is the default one since I'm cycling through the rest of the text as fast as I can read it. It doesn't matter much anyway, and the choices are really out of character and represent the translator's personality more than anything. Also, the game's going to proceed the exact same way no matter what you choose. You're also forced to cycle through what could have been a printed instruction manual which bogs down the gameplay in the beginning. However, I'll take this over a forced tutorial any day. The graphics are pretty nice, but the frame rate can be pretty bad, especially in the cutscenes. The music is naturally outstanding, much of it from the previous Ys games, but rearranged here. There's some new stuff as well, and it doesn't disappoint. While this game certainly isn't as good as Dawn of Ys on the PC Engine, it's still fantastic in its own right and should not be missed. Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Donna is probably my favorite game in the series. I bought the Vita version mainly to support the series so that they keep translating them and bringing them over. I initially played through it on the PlayStation 4, but this version is pretty good as well, though it runs at half the frame rate. You begin your adventure on a nice, peaceful cruise talking to people. But that comes to an abrupt stop when you're attacked by a giant sea monster. Later, you along with everyone else wake up on a mysterious island. The gameplay is exactly like Memories of Celceta, which is a good thing. Oh, and you can jump now, so that's even better. Like Killzone, this one takes advantage of the PlayStation 3 controller if you play it on a PlayStation TV. Oh, and check out the back of the box here. Now, I don't read or speak French, but something is definitely up with this text here. This was discovered by the fantastic site digitalemilist.com, which is dedicated to all things Ys. According to them, this is placeholder text, and it's saying something to the effect of, "I'm sorry to leave you, but I have to buy a hat. I am going to ask these peasants who come to meet us if the way in which they have passed is bad." NIS America eventually fixed this and re-released it with the correct French text. This was the first version made, and the PlayStation 4 version has a bit more content, but I haven't played far enough in this one to see what's missing. Of course, the graphics aren't quite as good as the PlayStation 4 version, but it's perfectly playable. You'll also get to enjoy a ton of outstanding music, which of course is no big surprise. Ys Origin came to the Vita in 2017, 11 years after it was initially released on PC. As a result, this game does show its age, but it's still an absolute blast to play through. This is the only game in the series thus far that doesn't feature Adol as the main character. It takes place about 800 years prior to his adventures. You can select to play as one of 2 different characters. The entire game takes place inside Darm Tower, which is about 100 times bigger than it was in Ys 1, maybe even more. Regardless, the graphics are decent, though sadly run at half the frame rate of pretty much any other version. And as always, the music is incredible. This is a fun one for sure. Uncharted Golden Abyss has been mentioned on the show before, but it simply must be mentioned in this episode, even if it's brief. After all, it's one of the few true exclusive games on the Vita, and as of the making of this episode, hasn't been ported to any other platform. It wasn't developed by Naughty Dog, but instead Bend Studio, who has mostly been responsible for the Siphon Filter games. This was a launch game and probably helped sell a few Vitas. Wow, both this and Wipeout, that's actually not a bad launch lineup. It's expressly designed to use all of the gimmicky features on the system, which is the game's greatest flaw in my opinion. During melee attacks, for instance, you need to swipe in the direction of the arrows to finish off your opponent. This one takes place before the first game on the PlayStation 3. You're still exploring ancient ruins and climbing all over the place just like in the other games, but now you have to worry about touch features, which is neat the first few times it happens, but it gets old quickly. Regardless of all that, this is a solid adventure with a nice presentation. If you enjoy the other Uncharted games, I say take a chance on this one. If you hate touchscreen and motion controls, well then stay far, far away. They're worth it for this game though. Now, if you want a game that uses every single gimmick possible, then Tearaway from the makers of Little Big Planet is a good one to have. This is the only way I can record this game as it crashes on a PlayStation TV, even if it's been hacked. But then again, the PlayStation TV doesn't have a camera and you kinda need that here.
Look, there they are.
Oh, what is it?
You basically play as a piece of mail in a land built of paper. You'll need to engage the rear touchpad for things like these bouncing drums. You'll also be touching the screen for a lot of basic attacks. Even the gyroscope is in use here. This is by no means a bad game, even with all of these gimmicks. It's one of the few games on the planet that actually makes good use of the gimmicks like this. However, I'm just not set up to capture the gameplay this way, and having all of this equipment in front of me as I play started to get uncomfortable really fast. Still, you definitely want to give Tearaway a try. Lost Dimension from Atlas is an interesting take on strategy RPGs. Basically, half of the world has been destroyed by some guy for no discernible reason. It doesn't waste your time trying to set up the entire story at the beginning of the game, but instead tells you as you progress. You control a band of gifted warriors, each with their own special power that they can use in battle. The game works similar to other strategy RPGs in that you have a limited amount of space that you can move and you can only attack enemies in range. Gone are the grids and hexagons though. I really like how it's set up here. You can choose a main attack or gift, which is your character's special ability if they have one. Of course, there's a player phase and an enemy phase. Between missions, you can talk to all of the characters and hopefully build some camaraderie. You can also get new items and set up your characters and all that. When a mission is over is also when you gain all of your experience and level up. If there's one thing that I don't particularly care for, it's the loading time before attacks that often occurs during battle. Other than that, it's all good and there are lots of missions to take on. The visuals are decent if a bit low budget, but the music is pretty good. Definitely check this out if you like strategy RPGs. It's also on the PlayStation 3 and Windows.
How'd you like that?
Commencing assault.
Ever since Phoenix Wright on the DS, I've loved visual novels, at least the ones with interaction and actual gameplay in them. Now, I don't know whatever made me look up information on the Danganronpa series to see if I'd like it, but I'm sure glad I did. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc was a really nice surprise when it was released in 2013. Originally a PSP game in Japan, I first played it here on the Vita. I love these types of games because it reminds me a lot of how Phoenix Wright plays. You're a kid who's been accepted to a school for extremely gifted people. Right as you walk in, you seem to faint. You wake up and find that you're locked inside the school with 14 other students, and even the windows have metal plates installed on them. What is going on here? You're called to the gym by the headmaster, who turns out to be an evil teddy bear.
I'm not a teddy bear.
His name is Monokuma, and he says the only way anyone can leave the school is if they kill someone. It doesn't matter who or how, but if they can remain undiscovered as the murderer, they'll be allowed to leave. Of course, this makes everyone freak out and not trust each other at all. The gameplay largely consists of lots of conversations. You can wander around at your leisure as well as investigate different items throughout each room. Eventually, you'll go to trial to find out who killed who. These can be a bit convoluted, but they work. Your goal in the game isn't to kill someone else, it's to find out who the killer is. Like I said, if the killer goes undiscovered, they get to leave the school, but then everyone else dies, so it's kind of in everyone's best interest to find out who the murderer is. Well, everyone's best interest except the actual killer. There are tons upon tons of mostly automated conversations in this game, but for whatever reason, I enjoy it anyway because they do a good job of keeping you interested. The only thing that slightly bothers me about this is that sometimes the voice will say something different than the actual text.
Come on.
You hear me?
Seriously, why even have the voice play at all in these situations? Oh, there is one other thing that bothers me about this game, and that's that all the blood is pink, despite the game being rated M. I get that this is probably a stylistic choice for whatever reason, but I still think it looks kind of dumb. Other than those two things, I have zero complaints. I love how everything is in 2D and drops into a room as you enter. I love the illustrations. The music is also extremely good.
What? Stop talking.
I highly recommend this one, and it kept me engrossed throughout. There are 2 sequels on the Vita which feature new characters and scenarios. They both have similar gameplay with new stuff added to enjoy as well. A side story to these games is Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls. This one isn't an investigative adventure, but rather a third-person shooter which features some characters from the first 2 games. You're hunting down Monokumas who are absolutely everywhere, killing people. Your weapon has different types of bullets that you can fire. For example, a green move bullet can activate locks, cars, and other things so that you can progress. You acquire more kinds of bullets as you move through the game. You can also switch to Genocide Jill, who can slice up enemies and moves really fast and has bad camera control. Mostly this game is pretty good, but it does interrupt the gameplay for tons of chit-chat, especially towards the beginning. This is fine in the regular games, but it gets kind of annoying in an action game. Otherwise, this is a fairly decent side story. You can also get all of the Danganronpa games on the PlayStation 4.
As I thought, Master's gun is perfect. Even idiots can use it. That kid was playing with a body. It's not a rare sight around here.
Ouch!
Super Monkey Ball Banana Splits was the last original Monkey Ball game ever released, at least at the time of this episode. Is it the game that killed the franchise? Perhaps. The game gives you a choice between normal controls or tilting controls, where, of course, you tilt your Vita. The game also relies on the touchscreen for all menu selections. Why normal controls can't also be used for the menu functions is beyond me. Just goes to show how out of touch Sega is, I guess. The premise is simply to get your monkey to the goal. Collecting bananas on the way will eventually earn you a 1-up. The small Vita analog stick mostly suffices for this game. You think it might be a little easier using a PlayStation TV and a real PlayStation controller, but it actually isn't. If you play it that way, you'll also need to worry about accidentally pushing in an analog stick which engages the touchscreen controls and your monkey loses control. Also, I've probably said this before, but I'm going to say it again. There is no analog stick on the planet that can match what the GameCube has. As a result, controlling this game is noticeably more wonky than the originals. The stages take a few nods from the past games, but mostly it's all original. The beginner and normal modes can be cleared pretty easily, but the advanced mode will start to ruin your life right away. Rolling across this dinosaur is outright brutal. It doesn't look it, but it is, and you'll need more luck than skill to do it. There are a bunch of party games on here, even Monkey Target, which is my favorite, but you need to use the motion controls to play it and most of the other party games. The good news is that the graphics are pretty nice and seem to take inspiration from the absolutely horrible Wii entries in the series. But they also soon start to flourish on their own after you get past a few stages. It's also one of only a handful of Vita games that run at 60 frames per second. The music is great as well. Overall, this isn't a horrible game, but it could definitely be better. I'd say that this is probably the 4th best Monkey Ball game, behind the first and then the second game, and then the 3DS entry.
Ready? Go!
Here's an interesting one called Soul Sacrifice, which is exclusive to the Vita. This one was designed by Keiji Inafune of Capcom fame. Well, after he left Capcom, of course. This game is full of cool ideas. You're a dude in some sort of prison who stumbles across a book. Well, actually, you don't have to be a dude, you can design your own character. Anyway, within the book's pages are the journals of the final boss who has you imprisoned and also whom you must eventually defeat. You relive what he wrote in it, and that comprises the action stages. You have a bunch of functions that you can assign to the various buttons, and you can switch between them with the R button. Once you defeat a monster, it turns into kind of a black blob. You then determine if you will save or sacrifice it. Saving it will get you some life back, whereas sacrificing it will restore some of your attacks, as most aren't unlimited. You're usually on the battleground with another character, and if you die, you can have them save or sacrifice you. Most of the attacks are very, very slow and happen quite some time after you press the button, since you need to wait for lots of animation. I feel the fighting mechanics could be better, as the enemy will often move out of the way before you're able to get some of those attacks off. You'll be rewarded depending on how you do in battle, and before each Phantom Quest, you'll be able to choose which kinds of powers you'd like to take with you. You can also power them up and replenish them on this screen. Despite the laggy controls, this is still a fun and interesting game to play. The bosses are all extremely tough and require a bit of work to finish off. The visuals are perfect for the game. Some of the stronger attacks you can do look pretty crazy. The music by Yasunori Matsuda and Wataru Hokoyama is a mix between beautiful and outright bombastic. I think everyone should try this one to see if they like it. For the most part, I certainly did. There's also Soul Sacrifice Delta, which is a slightly upgraded version.
Slow me down.
There you go, a bunch of games for the Vita that I felt like talking about for one reason or another. It's an interesting system for sure, and I wonder what kinds of games would have come out for it had Sony given it more love. Believe it or not, there are still games being released for the thing from time to time from third parties. It's a cool system, but I gotta say, I like the PSP more. In fact, I like it a lot more. But what do you think of the Vita? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. You know, I just realized I didn't cover any of the 2D fighting games that are on the Vita. So let's take a look at Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax. Even says Sega on the back. Wait! Don't play that game! What? Why not? Who are you? I'm you from the future. 10 minutes in the future to be exact. I built a time machine to come back to warn you not to play that game! Why, is this a bad game? I mean, it's okay, I guess, but look what happens to you if you play it! Oh, you're from the future, huh? Well then who's Secretary of State? In the future. I'm only from 10 minutes in the future, so the same one, obviously. Do you have flying cars? Yeah, of course, I'm from the future, duh. Screw this, I'm gonna play! Worth it.